Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of the Emerald Planet and Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have a planet of 9 billion people by 2038 and possibly 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how are we going to be able to take care of all these people on planet Earth? And that's what Emerald Planet's all about. We come to you looking at the solutions, the best practices from around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet. Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet. We're making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And seeing the long-term impacts of climate change. We're glad to have you. Thank you for being with us. One of the very dynamic areas of the world is becoming the Caribbean and the Caribbean Basin. 34 countries, territories, and dependencies, all making up a great mosaic of energy, opportunities, and challenges as far as the environment is concerned, but also to contribute to economic development and for the communities that are there. And so we have Racquel, who is the CEO of the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator, and we're going to be talking about the Caribbean and its great diversity, but also what is a climate-smart accelerator. So Racquel, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for having me.
Glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about this very unique name that you have for your organization.
So we are the Climate Smart Accelerator. We are a coalition of 27 Caribbean nations that have joined this initiative to create the world's first climate smart zone, and we wanted to be in the Caribbean. And by climate smart, what we're referring to is modernizing our infrastructure, both physical and social infrastructure, to be able to deliver a secure future and climate resilient future for the region. And accelerator because we're meant to make it happen as quickly as possible.
I think the pace that you're taking when you look at this map and how it is far flung across the Greater Antilles into the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea. It's just amazing that you can put your arms around such diversity and such many different countries and even languages. So tell us, why is the Caribbean so important to the world community?
So the Caribbean functions in many ways as it relates to climate change as the canary in the coal mine. What is happening to the rest of the world is happening to us first. We're the ones facing more ferocious storms, sea level rise, and we are being impacted while others are projecting when the impact will take place. The impact is happening to us right now. We're experiencing loss of livelihood and lives and biodiversity now. We are already at a bit of a tipping point that we need to address. And because of the diversity of this region, as you've outlined, in terms of language, in terms of distance from each other, in terms of its natural beauty, we are the best place to start piloting and pivoting the Earth into a new climate smart existence.
I think it's just marvelous that you're doing this, particularly the Caribbean. I've traveled somewhat throughout the Caribbean, a number of different countries, and it's just a marvelous region of the Earth. And it's something that we really need to make sure that more and more people know about. Looking at the Climate Smart Map, this is the topic we have right now. Tell us, what is the Climate Smart Map?
So the Climate Smart Map is where we want to define. So when we launched the accelerator, and the photo you're seeing is when we launched the accelerator, and Dr. Angus Friday there, talking about what was the big picture that we were going to do, we wanted to define a path for the region to resilience. And this Climate Smart Map is the thing that will help us to get there. So it is defining where we are today in terms of how much of our ocean we protect, how much of our land we protect, in terms of how much renewable energy we have, in terms of how secure and resilient that we feel, and project into the future where is it that we intend to go, and what is it that the accelerator intends to deliver? So how much renewable energy will we have? How much protection will we have? How resilient will we consider ourselves at the end of this process? And the Climate Smart Map is intended to provide us with some specificity around how we get there and some funding mechanisms that are available to help get us there.
Mm-hmm. It's all very, very important. As far as the Climate Smart Map, what else is guiding you as far as moving forward towards 2050?
A lot of things are helping guide us there. We're working across the region with a number of governments in determining where they are now, the Paris commitments that they've made, how much we want to up the Paris commitments, and how fast we want to get there. And in this photo at the launch, Usain Bolt is announcing the launch of the Speed Award, because what we want is for countries to be able to move to that climate smart state as quickly as possible. So countries have already made, their nationally determined contributions as a part of the Paris commitments. But what we want them to do is to continue to up the ante, as Usain has done, and certainly to do that with speed. And so there is an acknowledgement and a reward for countries who get there the fastest. And he was announcing that initiative at our launch.
You certainly have the right person to exhibit speed and forward movement. He's an incredible human being. And what a great representative for not only his own home country, but for the entire Caribbean. I know you really, in a sense, you said, when are we going to finish? This is something that will never be finished. You'll be carrying this forward into the 22nd century. But how are you moving forward? What are the benchmarks and the outcomes that you're having as far as, the Climate Smart Map?
That's fantastic. So, you see Richard Branson there and Jean Olwang there talking with one of the at the time, the finance minister of Jamaica. And what we want countries to do in terms of their milestones is to determine the areas that they want to focus on, which they would have done through their Paris commitments. And so, for example, one of the challenges is, how do we create more economic opportunities out of climate action? And how do we create economic opportunities that we have the ability to export? How do we build our economies on climate action? And that's one of the things that we want to do. So one of our initiatives as a part of this, rolling out this Climate Smart Map, is how many jobs can we create in climate action, for example. And if we can just contribute 1.5% new green jobs as an example, that would be something that we can hang our hat on and can be a major milestone for us as we roll out our initiatives on the Climate Smart Map. And as you see in this photo, we're willing to have fun in the process of doing that. The Prime Minister of Jamaica, the former President of the IDB, one of the senators from Jamaica, along with Richard, feel incredibly passionate about how we plan to get to the end state that we're working towards. So this Climate Smart Map is meant for us to get countries and governments together with people like the IDB, with people like Richard, and agree as to what are the things that we're working towards and what are the things that will make the most difference. And in this photo, you'll see one of the things that we think will make the most difference is behaving as though we are actually in a climate threatened environment. So Richard's taking off Andrew Holness's tie because he's saying he's the only one dressed for the environment that we're in. And Prime Minister Holness accepted that and allowed Richard to take off his tie. And so that's what we need to do as we go through this process of transitioning our economies and transitioning the way that we think and do things. We need to act accordingly. We need to dress for the environment. We need to understand that this is something that is real and impactful. Mm-hmm. And here is Richard talking at the One Planet Summit, where he is looking at, how do we were the first high-level initiative at that One Planet Summit. And it's so important for us to see this through. The One Planet Summit has launched a website that includes all of the initiatives that were launched and how far along they are. And it's so very important to measure the success that we're having. And I think that's part of the challenge that we have with climate action, is that we're not measuring enough, and our Climate Smart Map is meant to measure the milestones and our achievement against them.
Now, how will the member countries be participating? Because you have great diversity among the 27 that actually have signed on to be a part of this, but yet they're quite different. You know, we think of the Caribbean, it's all the same. It's, you know, in the tropical belt and what people eat and how they dress and all that, but there really is great diversity. So, how do you expect them to participate so that they're contributing their unique talents, opportunities, economies? Even technologies.
We expect them to participate from where they are. So, one of the things that we're doing is we are working with a number of different stakeholders in identifying countries' strengths against their weaknesses and identifying how resilient do they feel. So, we're preparing together with some folks from the New Energy events a resilience scorecard. And as you see there, uh, Professor Hillary of the University of the West Indies is in that frame. And we work very, very closely with the University of the West Indies, and they have some fantastic scientists who are contributing to the IPCC global reports that come out to talk about how much time we have left and the things that we have to do. So by measuring our resilience and making sure that countries have the ability to speak to what their goals are from their own perspective. St. Vincent and their volcanoes, for example, you know, they would need to put different things in place as it relates to climate action, but they also have the opportunity to use geothermal as a renewable energy source, which other countries may not have. So it is about taking this broad approach, working with people that you see in this image from CARICOM, from the OECS, from the IDB, from all of the organizations, from the University of the West Indies, from government, from, you know, pulling all of the region together, working under this single umbrella to create this climate smart zone and use this climate smart map to define the path that we will take to get there.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. Looking at citizens and thought leaders from within the communities, how are you involving them and being motivated by, you know, the elected officials, but at the same time contributing their unique skills, talents, and also traditional wisdom of the areas within which they live? You know, I lived in Jamaica twice. You know, from one end of that very small country to the other, the climate zone is quite different. So, how they
Yes.
can achieve and contribute to these goals that you've laid out for the climate smart map.
Well, one of the things that we want to do is to empower regular citizens by providing them with access to information so that they know how their countries are doing. And one of the things that, you know, the last picture was of Prime Minister Holness that we've appreciated about him, in addition to his ability and willingness to collaborate with us, but also his desire to listen to his people and have them feed back to him the kinds of changes that they want to take. They did a phenomenal job of putting in place a plastics ban, for example, and that was largely, you know, a citizen-inspired initiative. And so we want to see more things like that. We've also launched with the IDB, and you had a picture of President Moreno, a campaign called Build Forward, where we want to pivot from the way that we think of ourselves and use that change in our mindset to build new technologies, to build new solutions, you know, hydrogen transportation, digital transformation, and how we look at tourism, and to do those things in a completely new and unique way and empower ordinary people as well as entrepreneurs within the region to design new solutions that become a part of this future that we're designing.
Carl Moses, thank you for being with us. Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator as we create the Emerald Planet.
Thank you.
Well, Carl Moses, CEO of the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator, is in charge of a huge swath of the map and a huge swath of the globe called the Caribbean Basin. And it's an area that has great diversity, but also tremendous natural resources for the production of renewable energy. And to have this motto through the Climate-Smart Accelerator is 90% renewable energy for all. So, looking at that across all these different countries, Racquel, how does that really help you as far as moving forward in the 21st century to meet the guidelines for the Paris Accord, but also to really make most of these countries energy independent?
Yeah, so at the moment, when you look at the Caribbean, we have the average of renewable energy usage across the 27 countries that we work with is 17%. And that means that there's a long way for us to go, but it also means that there's a tremendous opportunity in getting to 90%. At the moment, based on the commitments that countries have made today, where countries have aspired towards an average of 57%. But you have countries like Costa Rica that are at 100% already, and they can run for 300 days on renewable energy. And that
Mm.
the independence that that represents, that you just mentioned, is so absolutely tremendous. And we want to see more countries get there. We know that it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be cheap, but it's
Mhm.
certainly something that they can work towards if we work together. When you look at the region, we have such diversity in terms of the types of renewable energy that we can use. We can use wind, we can use solar, we can use
Mhm.
geothermal, we can use wave, we can use, hydro. So there's so much that we can do, but each country has to figure out its ideal mix to be able to put together a portfolio to determine how it will deliver its energy independence.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. Looking at some of the different projects that you have, tell us about the ones that are going on now and maybe even some that are aspirational.
So two of the most exciting projects that we have within our portfolio is the solar assembly project, as well as the Caribbean Blended Financial Fund for Resilience. And those two are two of the most exciting ones that I'd love to share with you. The
Mhm.
solar assembly project, as you can see in the image below, you're seeing the implementation of solar, which is the biggest component of our renewable energy in the region at the moment. But we import those panels and then we implement them. What we want to do is to move up the food chain where we are manufacturing or assembling those raw materials into those panels so that we're participating in the economic opportunity of our energy independence. And that is certainly something that we want to see happen. And the other project is to bring funding to bear to make sure that we get more implementation of projects across the region so that projects that don't have enough resilience built into them have the opportunity to access this $100 million fund that we're building
Mhm.
to be able to deliver more solar projects across the region.
Yeah, I'm looking at this too, as you're providing skill training that probably was not there before. You're sourcing this from within the local communities. And I think this is absolutely fantastic. But it takes leadership that allows us to move forward. So, is 90% doable based on what you see as far as the leadership is concerned? Because the citizens seem that they really have bought into this idea and it's benefiting them as far as jobs and training.
What a perfect photograph to bring up as we're talking about whether or not it's doable. It is absolutely doable, but it's only doable if we have collaboration. And this photo represents the collaboration towards that Caribbean blended financial for blended finance for resilience fund. You
Mhm.
have people representing USAID, the Caribbean Development Bank, the University of the West Indies, the government of Barbados, me at the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator, the IRENA, which is the International Renewable Energy Agency, the government of St. Lucia, as well as other organizations. So if we work together and we have international support, 90% renewable energy is absolutely doable.
Mhm.
But again, things like this fund that we're building will help to make it financially accessible for the region,
Mhm.
because I think there's no lack of desire to make this to create this revised future. It is the lack of capacity and the lack of financial capacity, especially, to make it happen.
And I think the whole thing about the Climate Smart Accelerator is that you're actually pushing for capacity. And this is something that I think is gone now beyond aspirational. I mean, you're really demanding it. We need to do this across, all these different countries. And I think that's the energy and the strength of doing this no pun intended at all, is that you're really pushing this forward. Tell us what we're seeing here and why is this so important, again, as we move towards this 90% renewable energy?
So I think this is me speaking at an international conference, and that's a lot of what we do. It's a big part of what we do is the advocacy to make sure that we get countries on board, that countries buy into this revised target that we want to work towards, but it's making sure that they understand, listen, we're not asking you to go it alone. What we want you to be able to do is to understand that if we agree to new targets and new amplified targets, that we will work with you to find the funding to bring to bear on getting these projects implemented. So what we want to change working on the international stage and speaking at these events is to get countries to think about it differently, and then we help solve the problem of how, if they are willing to say yes to the overall objective.
Now, looking at the various countries, what are they contributing into this as far as making this 90% doable and doing it now instead of waiting, the next decades as we go towards 2050?
Part of what we ask them to contribute is the projects that they have. So they can tell us, listen, our aspiration is 75%, 80%, 90%, 100%. And then we say, okay, what are the projects that you currently have that help you to get there? And how far do those projects help you to get there? And we have a gap analysis that we've done that says, okay, a country is at 10%, they aspire towards 50%, but they have projects that help them get to 30%. So how do we close that gap between what they already have defined and what they have not defined? And how can we get the private sector involved? How can we get collaboration across countries? How can we get some innovative solutions? As we talked about wave energy, how do we get new innovative solutions in under the umbrella to be able to deliver and close that gap? When you see this picture, there's solar, but you're also seeing, a palm tree. And the interesting is that there's more than one way to deliver the renewable energy target that we want to get to. And it's not all about solar, despite solar being the most mature. We want to look at all kinds of different aspects of our energy mix. And we're also willing to think about it in terms of developing new types of renewable energy. I think that there's so much that's yet to be discovered. When we look at, I think it was Morgan, I won't quote the source because I'm not sure, but there is $80 trillion that needs to be spent just to deliver on what we've already committed to. So if we can be a part, that's real money. So if we can be a part of that solution in coming up with new types of new mechanisms to be able to deliver those new solutions, like wind. Wind is such a phenomenal resource, especially when you talk about certain islands, like the Dutch islands have a tremendous opportunity for wind energy, but they also have great waste to energy opportunities. And so, what we want is countries to contribute in thinking about things differently, approaching it differently, and looking to the economic opportunity of their energy independence as a chance to have this audacious goal, but also as an opportunity to meet the audacious goal.
And the whole thing about being 90% energy independent is not to be importing, fossil fuels, dirty diesel, and even natural gas, but producing your own. Because when you look at these blue waters right in front of us, and that's why I've left this photograph up, there's so much power in the sea, the water that surrounds most of these countries. It's just incredible the amount of energy. And with the University of the West Indies and its engineering department, you have some very smart people throughout all these different countries that can really get into this. Well, what are some of the challenges that you're facing? We're seeing some of the solutions here. I think this is a very clever one. But what's some of the challenges that you're actually facing, as well as the way you're being innovative with the solutions?
Yeah, so this solarized bus shelter and using this shelter as a way to generate power is a fantastic new solution. But some of the challenges that we're facing is the ability to afford things like this, but also the vision to be able to see this as a solution.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working with countries to be able to understand what is it that they want to achieve and how can we get them to up the ante and how can we get them to take that chance. The other challenge that we face is that we tend to operate in political cycles, and that's not useful for long-term development. So we need to have small manageable projects like this, where it's just a bus shelter that's going to contribute to the overall energy contribution. But we also need policy changes that are long-term policy changes that can help countries to make the kinds of policies to allow independent solar generation, to allow feed into the grid, to allow people to come up with new solutions, to allow electric vehicles, to build in the infrastructure for electric vehicles, for example, to allow the private sector to get involved and to create economic opportunities around some of these new solutions, and to create incentives as well as disincentives to traditional transportation. Because if we're going to create a new renewable energy objective, we're going to have to use vehicles that operate on renewable energy. We have to make the utilities see the value in the changes that are taking place. It's easy to stay in your comfort zone and operate the way that you've already operated because you're not taking chances. But who wouldn't want to travel in a vehicle that looks like this? It's fun and it's funky and it's electric, but it also is very Caribbean. It's colorful
Oh,
and open
it's
air.
just
It's
absolutely fantastic. But this is also very Caribbean. We're going to go out on this image right here. What are the drivers for the countries to really want to move forward? We only have about 40 seconds to do this. Well, the drivers for them to move towards this 90% goal.
I think it is the energy independence. So by doing utility scale projects like this one, we are able to get there more quickly, but it's going to take a contribution of big projects as well as small projects to be able to pull it all together and to get there. And that's what we need agreement on.
Yeah, and I like the image of this, and that's why I'm going out on this because you have these people walking together, working on this huge project, and you say small projects as well, but they're walking as they're going into the future. And I think this is really what the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator is all about. Thank you for being with us, Racquel Moses, the Climate Summit Accelerator for the Caribbean, 90% renewable energy for all, as we create the Emerald Planet. We have a topic under this Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. It's 30 by 30 using nature-based solutions. And this is what Emerald Planet's all about, is how do we take nature, allow its energy, the resources, its very essence to solve the problems that we have as we go through the 21st century. And Accelerator is looking for all these new and innovative ways of doing it. Racquel Moses, she's the CEO, Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator. And looking at the accelerator and this title of 30 by 30 using nature-based solutions, how do you do that when you have such diversity, such mileage in between all these different nations and make it all work?
Well, I think the issue of diversity is exactly how we use 30 by 30 to achieve our goal. So the 30 by 30 goal is to protect 30% of the land and 30% of the ocean by 2030. And it's what the best available science tells us is necessary in order to preserve the biodiversity that we have across the planet. And so what we want to do is to take a lead as a region in this protection and advocate for the developed world and other small island states to follow our lead. So it's really, really important that we, look at the role of the natural environment in protecting against hazards like our mangroves, like our coral reefs, that provide us with so much protection. And this photograph is from a risk conference that I attended, where we talked about the role of nature-based solutions and their ability to protect us. Because a lot of times we think about doing man-made solutions, but nature already knows how to protect itself. And what we have to do is to rely on that, innovations such as vetiver grass that can help prevent soil erosion, and all of the wondrous work of mangroves to sequester carbon as well as protect coastal erosion. What we have is truly spectacularly beautiful. And as beautiful as this photograph is, it's even more beautiful when you see it in real life. As you know, you've been to the region, you've lived in the region, and it's really important that we preserve what we have and keep it as wonderful as it is.
Now, looking at this photograph, I'm leaving it up purposely. I mean, this is a natural scene. You see, the buildings, so people actually, it's this land sea juxtaposition and easy transition from actually one end of your house to the other, one end of the lodge to the other. How does this translate directly into this nature-based solutions so that we really do protect this, we have mutual respect, but also to have mutual respect for all living beings, the plants, the sea creatures, the microorganisms. I mean, all of this must work together in order to protect this kind of scenery, and particularly this.
Yeah, so as long as we can just sort of keep just 30% protected, where there's no sort of invasive fishing, there isn't any cutting down of trees. Once we can allow nature to do its work and to regenerate itself, then we're free to use the rest of the land and sea that we have available for commercial purposes. But that would require, and that would allow us to do so in a sustainable fashion by allowing the regeneration of nature that we so need to keep us safe.
Now, looking at this photograph here, the land and sea is what this 30 by 30 is all about. And looking at the citizens that live there, and you're doing the education, you're doing the outreach, you're doing the promotions everywhere you go. How are they responding to this? So they are becoming part of the solution, and in essence, they are the solution to keep the islands, to keep the nations this pristine.
Caribbean nationals have been phenomenal advocates for the protection because they see it firsthand. What I found is that people who dive and people who spend time in the ocean are even more particular about how we protect it because they understand what's at stake and they see the changes that have been taking place. Our role is not only to help provide cash flows that can aid in the protection, but also to continue the education so that people are aware of what actions need to take place. And while there are lots of individual actions that need to take place, the real sort of big ticket items are at the policy level, and advocating for your governments to do the right things and to join the right agreements and to make the right commitments in order to protect the environment.
Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the things, I think this is a very pretty photograph, but I think this is one of the benefits as far as the islands. You have small nations, and many of them have small population bases, but the elected officials live really next to their citizens. And that's one of the things that I find most intriguing about being there is that allowing the policymakers and the others to have to live in this environment. I shouldn't say have to, they relish being there. But at the same time, they understand how they must protect it for all citizens. So when you're bringing the policymakers together, the citizens, and then considering all the tourists that come from all over the globe to see this natural beauty, how do you mesh that together so it works to the maximum benefit for everyone?
So what we have to do is to make sure that there is as much awareness as possible as to what are the things that we have to do and what is the path of least resistance to the solutions that we require to have. I think with governments, what you find a lot of times is that they have to weigh short-term interests and being reelected with long-term objectives like stemming climate change. And so we have to make it a part of both their short-term and their long-term vision because we are insisting upon the action that needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think when you have this type of natural beauty and you're living it day in and day out, I mean, this is a built environment for sure that we're looking at here. Very Caribbean, very blend into the countryside, even when you have the cars and the buildings and all these other things. It's really a different way of thinking and a different way of life. Having been there, lived there, it's just quite different than if you're in a Tokyo or a London or a New York or a Paris or somewhere like that. There's a flow and a style. Looking at this photograph, how does that flow and the style and the culture really help you to jumpstart this audacious accelerator that you've created?
So I think the most important piece for us is that there is absolute will to create the climate smart zone that we need. What there isn't enough of is money to create this climate smart zone. So what we are focused on is creating cash flows. So from protection, for example. So we're working closely with the Inter-American Development Bank on creating financial instruments that work to protect nature. There are people with vested interests in how much carbon we sequester and how much of our natural environment that we protect, and they're willing to pay for that. And so we have to make sure that we are able to tap into those cash flows so that the protection can take place, because the protection, unfortunately, is not inexpensive in the least.
I think one of the things that's really a benefit is because energy mostly came from very dirty diesel for decades, and so a lot of it was generated by the homes and all that. And so moving to solar and wind, something that people actually distributed energy they can do themselves, is something that really saves people money. And at the same time, it's saving the environment. So, how does this uh, background, this history of very high energy cost, now you're saying, hey, we can produce our own and it's going to be far less expensive. How does that play into protecting the environment and doing the right thing?
So, we need all of these things to cooperate. So we need the right thing to be the cheap thing to be, the thing that people are aware of, and that perfect sort of triangle, and making sure that not, renewable energy is always the best solution in the long term, but the upfront costs can be prohibitive. So we're advocating and working with a lot of the regional institutions to try and lower the entry costs of renewable energy, but also looking at that at an individual scale as well as at a utility scale, so that if you can't afford to generate your own solar, at least you have the ability to connect to cheap energy that's good for you.
Now, looking at this 30 by 30 and nature based solutions, how of what we're looking at right here, Racquel, how is that getting at that 30 by 30 and using nature as the solution?
Sure. So what you're looking at is seagrass here, and one of the things that we struggle with quite a bit in the region that you're not seeing in this picture is sargassum. And another issue that we have is sort of as lionfish, which is a really invasive species that's killing a lot of the natural environment and the natural fish that we have. And so looking into the water just talks us through how do we take what we have and use the things that are actually harming us to do other things. So there is an entrepreneur in St. Lucia that's using sargassum to make biofuels. There are other entrepreneurs working on some incredibly innovative solutions that we want to use to export. But the things that we're producing too much of, we can find uses for those that we can then transform them into different products that we can then sell on the open market.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things too, and we're just about running out of time, Raquel, but you have wave action, you have all this water. I mean, you really all the energy sources that you need around you, plus innovative and new technologies, is certainly a path forward to do all of this. But how do we take this natural beauty, translate that into the future? And we have about 15 seconds left to answer that point.
Well, I think for us, it's really about building our resilience. So in this picture, you see the pepper. It's about, our food security, our energy security, the security of our environment, and making sure that we're looking at all of those things all together and making the best solutions.
So, as we go out, this is a beautiful scene. This is a beautiful region of the planet, the Caribbean Basin. And Racquel Moses, CEO, Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator. Thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet. Looking at the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator, this is led by Racquel Moses. She's the CEO of the accelerator. But they're looking at the creation of new green jobs. And of course, as you have more and more youth being born into the various countries that make up the Caribbean Basin, there's always the need for new jobs, but green jobs. This is something that's very near and dear as far as what the accelerator is doing. So, Racquel, looking at this 1.5% new green jobs for transformation, people are saying 1.5%. Why that?
So 1.5% is a funny thing. We coined the phrase within the region, the 1.5 to stay alive, to keep our emissions below a particular level so that we don't increase global warming by 1.5%. And so we thought, a play on numbers to have 1.5% to 1.5 to stay alive, but 1.5 is a number that we're already familiar with relating to climate change. And it seems like such a small and innocuous number. So if we can at least just get to 1.5% of new green jobs, so we're saying of the total number of jobs that we have within the region, add 1.5%, and do that by bringing innovation to the table. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is an innovation, one of our first projects. It's called source water panels, and they are panels that operate independent of the grid. They create water from sunlight and air. So the solar component of it actually energizes the mechanism, and then it pulls water from the air, it purifies it, and then puts it into an independent supply from the municipal supply. And what that allows us to do is to be more disaster resilient. So if there is a disaster, and this is the children's ward of the University of the West Indies Hospital in Jamaica, then it means that their water is completely safe and without impact if there is a disaster.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of things that we need to do.
Well, it's interesting that you're using this innovation. This is really an advanced technology and innovation that you have going there. And the whole thing about it is that you're creating new water. Now you're looking at the Caribbean Sea, the Atlantic Ocean. You're completely surrounded by water. But it's kind of like the old adage of water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. Why is it so important that you bring the humidity out of the air, many new sources as far as new water is concerned, as the populations continue to expand, across the Caribbean Basin?
Well, what we're seeing now, and that's a great question, what we're seeing now is that the impacts of climate change are with us. A lot of people are talking about, oh, well, we should try and avoid climate change. It's already happening. There are two things that we have to do. We either need to mitigate against climate change by reducing our carbon emissions, or we need to adapt to the changing environment that we know has already changed. And so this is a part of our adaptation because we're already seeing the impact to our aquifers, the impact to our water supply. So by creating more and new sources of independent water supply, it allows us to create solutions for ourselves as we know it will get drier. It allows us to adapt.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you have this type of system that's very innovative, it's advanced. Actually, this is something that needs to be done in thousands of communities all across the globe in order to bring this pure and clean drinking water so that you have it all the time. And as you're saying, during disasters and other times, is that you really need to always have water because we can do without food. We can do in some ways without the power, particularly if you're generating your own renewable power. But water you have to have. So, looking at these technologies, why choose the water and renewable energy as some of your first two emphasis for the accelerator?
Well, we're looking at the things that we're seeing, happening first. And so the first thing that we're seeing happening is this reduction in access to water. And we think the next sort of frontier is access to water as the thing that will, be a part of climate justice. So we want to be able to address water really quickly. Now, we didn't create this solution. It's a solution that was created out of the US by a company called Source Water. But what we want to do is we want to be pioneers in the implementation, the repair, and the proliferation of this water so that as it begins to grow across the globe, that we already have the know-how and it's a part of the new green jobs that we create in adaptation solutions and building solutions on top of solutions that are already out there.
And I think this is something that's very important, as far as bringing in these technologies, because what you're doing, you're actually training people now in the technology. How do you adapt? How do you create these technicians within the communities? And then you start building in and start creating your own technologies or enhancing the technologies that you brought in originally from overseas. But looking at these kinds of signings that you're doing with the accelerator, why is it so important that you're taking this kind of leadership with the collaboration, bringing in new technologies, but at the same time to allow your own people to not just survive, but thrive as we move through the 21st century?
So we're the ones on the front line. We're the ones being impacted by climate change now. And so if we don't take a leadership position, we will take a back seat to the changes that are taking place in terms of the action that we require to mitigate the changes that we want to see happen. So this was, I was speaking at a conference of a company called BIT, and they are working to digitize currencies across the region, and they're doing a phenomenal job of doing that. And so by having digital access to money, that means that post-disaster, again, a part of our adaptation strategy, because the storms, we're having 100-year storms happening in 10-year increments. Mm-hmm. And so access to money post-disaster is so very critical. And so again, taking a leadership role in the digitization of currencies and how that is used at a country level is something that we can do. And we can be the petri dish for how the rest of the world works on the digitization of their currency to increase the impact. And this is at the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. We do a phenomenal job of sort of the co-location of supplies when there are disasters and working with them to look at how do we innovate to ensure that we are up and running even more quickly than with each disaster, that we recover even more quickly. And so these are the kinds of things that we think will make a difference, but will also create jobs that we can then teach how to recover.
Now, looking at this, this notion of impact, when you have a natural disaster, and we're having them more and more in the United States. So, and no matter how big an economy you have, how much wealth you think you've accumulated, how grand your infrastructure may be, you have to realize that Mother Nature it will take its own. And how are you actually bringing all these diverse countries and peoples together to work and share the best of these technologies, these innovations, to make sure that going back to that concept of 90% of renewable energy for all, and how that really all these technologies, it's a 90% for all across all countries, even in disaster recovery.
Yeah, what a phenomenal question, especially as we're looking at this, where this was an event where we were supporting some Blue entrepreneurs. And it really is going to come down to the solutions that we create, the innovation that we enable, and how many people we can get working alongside us on providing new solutions. It's going, there's a saying in Jamaica that you must have heard while you were there, one cocoa full basket. And it talks about the concept of just adding small things together, but ultimately the phenomenal impact that adding those small things together can have.
Right. And the whole thing about, as you bring the elected officials into this and they're educated again, uh, because the countries are small, people really do live together in most cases. And so as you're having these conversations, you're looking at these solutions. How are the politicians, the elected officials, seeing this as not only important for their future to stay in their position, but also as a leapfrog ahead into the future for all the people, for all of the Caribbean countries and territories and dependencies?
I can tell you with quite earnestly that most of them want to do the right thing. They want us to help them to find reasons to do the right thing, or to help them to help enable them to do the right thing. Minister Nigel Clark, that you see there in that photograph, has been tremendous in terms of leading in advocacy and talking about the kinds of changes, but also talking about how we use money and how we use financial innovation to be able to solve problems. When you look at the balance sheets across the region, the some of the decisions that are being made out of necessity, not out of luxury. The cash flows are just not there. So if we can empower people to take more individual decisions and to create more revenue for the region, that is going to translate into more solutions and more action, like that, hurricane resistant infrastructure that we need, needs to be a part of our adaptation strategy.
And I think so too. It's just like looking at this structure right here. Where you're using all steel. This is probably well anchored in steel and concrete
Mhm.
to withstand against the hurricanes that you have going throughout the entire region. Is that you're really building for resiliency, and the time to mitigate the disaster is before it ever happens. It's just like
Yes.
the best kilowatt that you can use is the one that you never have to use.
Yeah.
And so hats off to everything that you're doing there. But going to the people, you have young people, well educated, well meaning, dynamic. I mean, you got very vibrant populations, across, the Caribbean area. How are they seeing their future, through innovation? How are they seeing their future as being a part of the solution?
So we're seeing a lot of innovation, but sadly, we're not seeing enough innovation, and we don't have a venture capital ecosystem here. So that's one of the things that we're seeking to create, is to provide more access to innovative capital that will allow entrepreneurs to think outside of the box. What we see a lot is that the entrepreneurs are thinking about how can they apply their solutions within their communities. We need them to think about how they will apply their solutions, not just in their communities, but in the entire country, within the entire region, and across the globe. And sometimes Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, gave a phenomenal speech at the launch of the Pivot Movement, where she talks about, our confidence and the need for us to be more confident in how we execute. And I think that that's where we are. We need to have that confidence, and we need to maintain that audaciousness that we've been talking about, to know that we are the best and the brightest, not just within our communities, but best and the brightest against the best and the brightest anywhere. And so we have the capacity to build solutions that can be exported, that can create the revenue streams that we require to engage in our own protection.
Perfect summary as we create the Emerald Planet.